A Nefarious Nightmare contains themes that may be explicit or triggering for some. Specific warnings and disclaimers will be mentioned in the show notes. A Nefarious Nightmare assumes all parties that are mentioned in these cases to be innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Season 4.
So excuse if you can hear my voice cracking or anything. This is just kind of emotional. But, Justin, my favorite thing that we ever did together was you invited me over to watch a movie, and you let me pick the movie, and it was Jurassic Park 3, and it was my favorite Jurassic Park, and so that's why you didn't have a problem watching it, even though it's kind of the crappiest one. But you held my hand while we watched the movie. And so that was cute. And you still wanted to hang out after the movie was over. And so you said, do you want to walk to the mall and just walk around? And it was a little bit chilly outside, and I did not have a jacket or a coat or a hoodie or anything. And so you gave me a black sweatshirt, just a plain black sweatshirt, not a hoodie, just a sweatshirt. And then you said I could keep it. And I kept it for years. And I don't know what happened to that sweatshirt. This is where I'm starting to cry. But I really wish that I had it now. Even back then, I was very upset that I lost it. But it was my own personal piece of you. So I'm just sad that I don't have that anymore. But I've got the memory with it. So that's what I'm keeping from that. And I just want to let you know that I'm very thankful that I got to meet you and spend time with you and get to know your goofy ass, because everybody that knew you definitely knew that you were a goofball. Even my mother and my younger sister. The very first thing that my mother and sister said about you after you left my house one day was, oh God, he's tall. So you're very well remembered by anybody who ever had the pleasure of meeting you. And just know that you're missed and loved. So, yeah. Love you, buddy.
What you just heard was a contribution from Christina Daniels from the original episode, as she wanted to help us paint a picture of Justin Barnard. She was one of our sources for this episode as well as the original, and was a very close friend of his. With this in mind, we have a question. What do you all think about the game of broken telephone? We think that it's a horrible way to get information, and it could have some pretty bad consequences. It could be fun in the right setting and context, as an actual game, but when it goes real life, that's where things tend to get murky.
Do you know of a time where you were in a position where people gossiped about you or told lies about you? We all have fallen victim to that. And unfortunately, this case that we discussed today is a case of broken telephone that turned into a completely senseless murder. This is the story of Justin Derik Barnard, and we want to make sure it expands outside Ohio. With that, I'm Amanda Cronin.
And I'm Courtney Fenner, and A Nefarious Nightmare presents A Foolish Game, The Murder of Justin Derik Barnard.
This episode kind of brushes up on bullying and gossip, a bit like the Amanda Todd case we discussed in Season 3, and also has many parallels to Jennifer Daughtry's case. We all can agree that it's sad that bullying is seemingly gaining more traction now that social media and the internet are involved. And unfortunately, no matter how much it has a light shed on it, it still occurs and seems to get worse every day.
One thing I want to say to everyone listening, if you're being bullied, just remember that the person doing that to you is fighting their own inner battle and are probably being bullied even worse and taking it out on you. It does not excuse their behavior, but is often mirroring what's happening to them at home. If you are being threatened or bullied in any way, please reach out and speak to somebody. If you have a friend, tell your friend. And if you have a good family, tell them.
And if for whatever reason you do not have an inner circle, there are resources available out there to help you out. This case is very little known, and it deserves to have a huge light shed on it. Also, we will link this in our show notes, but you can find plenty of resources, including the Trevor Project at bullyburst.org/resources.
We have covered this case in Season 1, originally called A Taboo Tango, the murder of Justin Derik Barnard. We had pleaded with others to cover this case, but unfortunately have found no evidence that this has been covered outside of our podcast and also New Philadelphia, Ohio. And no, this isn't a case about your typical big-time serial killer or a viral missing persons case, but every victim's story deserves to be heard, and Justin Barnard is absolutely no exception. Sonia Cohen, our social media manager, was the one who originally asked us to tackle this case. So once again, thank you to Sonia for that suggestion.
Looking at his picture in his obituary, you can feel that he had this genuine soul, like he had this naivete about him. He looked to be very smart, but also very giving, like he could have easily been taken advantage of. He seems like the kind of kid who would show up on your doorstep if you needed help with something. And no matter how much work you had given him, he would just smile right through it. Kind of like a yes man. What makes that sad is that this world is completely trying to diminish that kind of personality. And then there's sick people out there that will take full advantage of that right down to the death. Truth be told, we need more yes men like Justin. But unfortunately, it's like it's becoming extinct.
Justin was born in Canton, Ohio, to Patricia Barnard Stoller and Michael Barnard, who's actually from Felton, California, according to some sources. It said that he wasn't well cared for in his childhood, but I can't confirm that as a fact because so many different sources suggest otherwise. And based off of my own reading, I only see parents that really absolutely wanted justice for their son. However, it is thought that he had grown up with very little and basically had a life suggesting financial difficulty. The majority of his academic life was spent within the New Philadelphia School District, but also spent over a year living with his dad in California. During his brief time in Cali, he was described as someone who had a passion for helping his friends, spoiling his pets, telling outrageous stories, and using Legos, model cars, and model aircraft to create things for others that would reveal his vivid imagination. He also loved NASCAR, where his brother is certain that, quote, Justin's ability to take things apart and put them back together would make him a great candidate for a mechanic in just about any pit crew.
He had his entire life ahead of him, and it was completely robbed from him. So what are we doing to make sure that he is known about and remembered? He enjoyed bike riding, skateboarding, and was really into playing video games and watching television. Basically, your typical kid. He was noted as being really into The Daily Show. He also considered as a caregiver to his friends and family, and many friends remember Justin for his quote-unquote attentive ear and his ability to listen. He was thought of a teenage therapist.
His mom remembers him as someone who was, like most teenagers, trying to find himself, who never even had a driver's license or even fell deeply in love and had his heart broken, that someone had stopped him too short. He always gravitated towards the troubled kids or outcasts because he got along with the misfits more than anyone else. Normally, when remembering a victim, we would pull a comment or two from their obituary, but there are so many comments. So instead, we've gathered a ton of information from close sources, and we will link his obituary in the show notes under sources, which I strongly encourage everyone to go read because those comments are truly heartbreaking.
There was a teen center he used to visit called Park Place Teen Center. This is where he had become friends with two sources, Sonia Cohen, who had worked there, and Christina Daniels, both who have helped us paint a better portrait of Justin Barnard.
Park Place was what looked just like a hangout spot that looked like a billiards bar, but teenagers were allowed and even encouraged to hang out there. It was pretty much a safe haven for teenagers to just go and unwind. A lot of the information on him moving forward will come from those sources, and I want to say ahead of time that they both are relying on memory, and they are giving me everything that they just can remember.
Sonia recalls, quote, Justin was the most kind kid. He loved Legos. So I met him while I was working at our local teen center. Most of the teens, like most, came there and would hang out and visit with their friends as expected. Justin was always helping out around the teen center and helping the other kids when they needed computer, game, or pool access, if he could help. He had this innocence and naivety about him. Nearly every Halloween, he would pass out candy for the trick-or-treaters at the center. He was seriously, hands down, one of the kindest people I've met, end quote. It seems like a lot of people, from what we have read, are saying that or similar.
One of our sources, who wishes to remain anonymous, did say, quote, he didn't come from much, I don't think, but I can't say for certain, but I don't believe his home life was the best. He didn't ever go to Park Place with money, but he always went. He's the type of guy that if he only had a quarter to his name and you needed it, he'd give it to you. End quote.
Now, upon discussing this further with both Sonia and Christina, they both had some vague memories about Amanda Bowditch, who plays a big part in this. And for the sake of accuracy and to better explain the situation and to give our listeners a better idea of how Amanda ties into Justin, I will say that these are just memories and some of these are uncertain, and that some of these things remembered were from what others had said. Therefore, both Christina and Sonia would like to go on record to say that they aren't entirely sure, but that this is what they do remember.
Amanda grew up, like Justin, having very little. It is also believed, but uncertain, that some sexual abuse and trauma may have occurred in her childhood, which brought about a personality later described as cold and abrasive, possibly as a defense mechanism that was nurtured due to the possibility of being groomed and abuse. She's remembered in later adolescence as someone who was mentally unstable, who would often play a victim of situations she would instigate in the first place, and bend to whatever was going on around her for the sake of getting people to like her. So she was both impressionable, but also she was hard.
If you're wondering what we wondered, which is, would this be typical of borderline personality disorder? While we are not therapists, that's kind of what it sounds like. And as it turns out, she had a manipulative personality and would obtain what she believed to be close friendships, whom these friends did not actually reciprocate once she was not present. She's also remembered as someone who didn't take her personal hygiene very seriously, which could be both a response to depression or another trauma response. She was the recipient of some bullying due to that.
At one point, Amanda and her husband, Chad Bowditch, had separated, and an extremely brief relationship occurred between Justin and Amanda. Once the separation between Chad and Amanda was reconciled, however, Justin and Amanda parted ways. Keep in mind, Chad, he's known for extreme anger and jealousy. It also doesn't help that the name Chad has been known to be the male equivalent to the name Karen, but I digress.
The discovery occurred on September 27, 2005, at the Tuscarawas River, located near Akron, Ohio, where police discovered a body wrapped in a sheet that was bound in a blue weighted rope, snagged on a tree limb. A further discovery revealed that bloat and badly decomposing body, and later confirmed that to be of Justin Barnard. And we will later circle back around to this very paragraph.
It all started on the previous Sunday, September 18th, 2005, where Justin visited Tuscarawas Park, which is located in New Philadelphia. He went to meet with some friends and, according to sources, stayed the night at a brown house near the home of a 42-year-old woman by the name of Diane Dinkelman, who will come up later.
According to Justin's mother, she saw Chad and Amanda often, and Justin had planned to move in with them. So Justin's mother knew of Chad and Amanda. It's pretty unclear as to how well, but given the statements made later, she knew that Justin at least cared about one of them. Chad and Amanda were due to be evicted from this home, and they were already in the middle of moving their stuff to Diane Dinkelman's home, where Justin Stephen lived. Now here, for the sake of clarity, and since there are two Justins in this case, we will refer to Justin Stephen as just Stephen moving forward.
All right, so I want to cut in here real quick and let everyone know that there was yet another Justin Barnard. And although of no relation, there's lots of similarities, as he had also been murdered over in Oklahoma due to an apparent hit put out on him by his girlfriend. In fact, I was kind of reading through that case originally, a little bit thinking that that was the case that we were going to be doing. But for the sake of clarity, if any of you decide to do further research into this case for any reason, please be aware that there are two Justin Barnards who are murder victims under very similar circumstances.
On Monday, September 19th, Diane Dinkelman took the Bowditches and Stephen to work at the Trail of Terror, which was a Halloween-themed attraction located close by. I've heard of just plainly good-hearted older people kind of taking younger people in out of just the pure goodness of their hearts. But honestly, I can already tell you that the Dinkelman is not one of those good people. That evening, Dinkelman went to pick them up. Justin Barnard was with friends at the county fair at this time.
Now, the Bowditches and Stefan went to the store to pick up snacks and alcohol, I guess getting ready to party after a long day at a Halloween theme park. They get back to Dinkelman's house and decide to plot a murder. Meanwhile, Justin is at the fair, minding his own business, being a kid, unaware of what's about to happen.
According to one of the sources, the blogspot Wikisource, they call Dinkelman D and say that she's easily upset. So Chad, knowing this, decides to use that Achilles heel to his advantage and goes to tell Dinkelman that Justin Barnard is running around the neighborhood basically talking shit about her and that he needs to be silenced for good. Chad basically instigates this whole thing. This is the bullying and the broken telephone we opened up with.
And it did not end well at all. They all leave to go look for Justin, but they can't find him because he's at the fair minding his own fucking business. Justin and one of his friends arrive at the brown house near midnight, and Chad and Stefan show up. They invite Justin over to their place, saying that they're planning a surprise birthday party for Dinkelman. Justin obliges and follows them to the house. He was given a beer, Stefan had taken a bit of acid, and all of them were smoking some weed.
At this point, Chad and Stephen tell Justin that they are heading down to the basement to get some more beer. It didn't take much convincing to get Justin to follow them because they were just partying and having a hell of a time. They all make it to the basement where Dee was hiding and waiting. At this point, Chad and Stephen, beers in hand, corner Justin, which Justin was oblivious because this is somewhat normal behavior when you're drunk at a party.
All right, so it's important to note that when you're under the influence, judgment does get muddled a little bit, which is one reason why laws are in place to have you consume certain things responsibly, because you're not as aware of what's going on and you're living in that feel-good moment. Since Justin was the kind of person that will do anything to make sure people are smiling, it seemed like he genuinely cared about people and wanted to make friends, and he was just genuinely having a good time. So when you have things like alcohol involved with that kind of personality, you're already psyched to see acceptance from your peers. Double that with being intoxicated, and unfortunately you get trusting and vulnerable in moments like these. So Justin, feeling like these people genuinely like him, obliged to their gestures super easily. Like he was very impressionable. Chad and Stefan, being ever the opportunist, corner him and one of them just says, "Let's chug."
What Justin didn't realize, however, was that not only was Dee hiding in the basement, but that they all had knives. As Justin put the bottle to his lips, out comes Dee with a knife, who stabbed him so forcefully that her knife went straight into the hilt. Over hearsay. Not to mention, this is a petty fucking gossip mill that was started because some insecure, overbearing, and jealous asshole by the name of Chad wanted vindication for Justin and his wife briefly seeing each other during a separation. That and 18-year-old Justin, still a senior in high school at the time of this, by the way, is a threat to a 42-year-old woman known to locals as Dee, who herself was acting so childish and insecure that she wants to stab a kid, not even fresh out of high school yet, over some gossip. 42 fucking years old, mad over high school bullshit.
Justin was a very kind soul, and his life was ripped from him over senseless acts. And this isn't to scare anybody into thinking that they shouldn't be kind. I mean, always be kind. It's the right thing to do, and it feels pretty damn good. I mean, okay, don't be kind if you're put in a situation where kindness is gonna get you killed. Like if a strange man is trying to holler at you, or I don't know, you're working at a gas station by yourself. I don't know. But by all means, if they don't get the hint, then be rude. But if you're kind and can also make a point that people cannot and will not take advantage of you, it truly does go a long way.
At this point, everyone else joined in, wielding their knives and stabbing Justin. There were no defensive wounds, only Justin saying over and over, "Why are you hurting me?" They then left him to suffer there for hours in a fetal position, putting their cigarettes out on him, as well as other forms of torture. It's easy for me to feel extreme sympathy for a victim in any case of bullying, especially a child. But something about reading this, Justin being so defenseless, really just breaks my heart. He was minding his own fucking business. I will never fully understand unnecessary evil in this world, and this was absolutely unnecessary.
Man, this part gets me every single time. But as he kept asking them why they were hurting him, Stefan took his knife and slit his throat in an effort to silence him. Chad decided that now was the time for another cigarette, and then stood there and watched Justin essentially bleed out. Stefan then took 2 bricks and gave 3 blows to Justin's head, finally, unfortunately, ending his life. And for what?
Around this time, Chad and Steven hosed Justin's lifeless body down of all the blood, where it went down a drain into Dee's basement. They then wrapped his body in a sheet and secured it with weighted fishing rope tied around his neck, waist, and legs, and then loaded his body into the back of Dee's pickup truck. It's both interesting and terrifying to note here that Dee had a 14-year-old son at the time who was upstairs the entire time all of this was happening. Thankfully, after all of this was said and done, he was taken from her by social services. But how could she, as a mother, do this to someone else's son? Like, you think that as a mother, you'd be at a pause.
Dee and Stefan then drove to a bridge on Mill Avenue Southeast near Newtown Mall. Around 3:00 a.m. on Tuesday, September 20th, Dee backed up towards the railing, and Stefan then threw Justin's body over the railing into the Tuscarawas River. On the way back, a police officer who was en route to respond to an alarm pulled Dee and Stefan over. Unfortunately, he let them go with a warning that day because Dee had forgotten to turn her lights on. So they basically got away with it. but only for now.
They returned to Dee's house. Dee, Stephen, Chad, and Amanda then resumed cleaning up that day. They were busy repainting the basement and cleaning up after what they had done in their effort to hide any evidence. They then threw out any knives used and the remainder of the weighted rope in different areas of both Dee's neighborhood and in a mobile home park called Shelmar, where Amanda Bowditch had grown up.
That next day, Chad and Stefan had a conversation, and Stefan remembered Chad being super giddy about what they had done, and Chad kept asking Stefan who they were going to kill today. Stefan had responded with, quote, "We ain't killing anyone else." A few days later, Chad, I guess covering his tracks, goes to Justin's mom's house to ask where Justin is. It seems as though Stefan at least started to show a little remorse, but it's believed that he had told someone that he's killed a man and he would do it again.
Chad had also told the others that they needed to avoid detection for 7 days, and that if they could do this, they would never be caught. Now, science proves that a decomposing body produces gas, and gas will bring a body to the surface of water. And it is here where I bring it back to the discovery that we started with. On September 27th, 2005, at the Tuscarawas River, located near Akron, Ohio, and Baberton, Ohio, police discovered a body wrapped in a sheet that was bound in blue weighted rope and snagged on a tree limb. A further discovery revealed bloated and badly decomposing body, and later confirmed it to be that of Justin Barnard.
Coroners determined that Barnard died from a massive skull fracture and also suffered 16 or 17 stab wounds to his head, neck, trunk, and extremities. 6 of these stab wounds were in the front of his neck, and 2 penetrated his voice box. They had said that the skull was intact, but that the blunt force trauma was so evident that Justin was nearly unrecognizable. With this intel, police start to track this and start questioning anyone who may have been a witness, including the Bowditch family. The police didn't yet realize how close they were. I mean, they were this close, right? They were so hot on their trail, but they didn't even know it. One of the people interviewed is the person that went to the fair with Justin, and this was the friend who accompanied Barnard to the fair and returned to the Brown house with him shortly before he was killed, and later would tell authorities that Chad Bowditch said later that Justin had left in the middle of the night to go to California to see his father.
At this point, they had no idea of Bowditch's involvement, but that didn't last for very long. They began questioning everyone and noticed many inconsistencies in stories. After several interviews over a period of several days and figured up after one person said they blatantly planned to drop Justin off at Dee's house, the police were tipped off to Dee, Chad, Stephen, and Amanda. Police said various inconsistencies pointed to the 4, but that nobody interviewed blatantly pinned blame on anyone.
And it's possible that nobody spoke right away because they felt scared or threatened by the 4, but because this miniature clique seemed to have some manipulative type of puppeteer personality, pure bully behavior, kind of like the whole wolf pack of Greensburg. They kind of acted like they ran the neighborhood, and I don't know, I feel like people would do just about anything to be left alone by these types of people.
They had then arrested all 4 of them with reasonable cause, and for some time, all but Dee were talking. As the 3 that were cooperating were starting to make confessions, police searched Dee's house and her pickup truck for evidence. One thing to note is that there's a magical substance called luminol that still sees all, so no amount of cleaning up will hide from luminol. For those of you that don't know, luminol is a substance used to pick up blood evidence not seen by the naked eye. Detectives are then able to take the evidence for further testing. If they are able to obtain DNA from the quote-unquote invisible to the naked eye samples that they send, and it matches with the victim, then it becomes evidence of a crime.
And I'm no scientist, but if bleach can make a t-shirt turn white but not burn through its fabric right away, I'm pretty sure that bleach can't burn through every bit of DNA evidence either. Also, Luminol can pull blood from a paint coating. The best way I can describe luminol, imagine dyeing your hair a color you can only see in the black light. You wash your hair until all the hair dye is gone, but the black light still picks up the hair dye that washed down the drain. Now, instead of hair dye, it's blood, and it shows up under a black light after you apply this substance, luminol, to a surface. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it anyway.
At one point, it's alleged that they all practiced Wicca and then Satanism. It keeps getting brought up, but it is found to have zero relevance to the case whatsoever. So to those of you coming into this with fresh eyes and ears, if anyone tries to pin blame on spiritualism, note that spiritualism has zero to do with this. Because while people have a neutral fear of the unknown, much like people made allegations against the West Memphis Three in the peak of the Satanic Panic, it is absolutely not relevant to the case. And honestly, regards to your beliefs or lack thereof, you still never know what people are capable of.
2 of these 4 had confessed to the murder, and the 3 teens continued to cooperate. And it finally came time for a trial. So Chad Bowditch and Stefan both received sentences of life in prison without parole in May of 2006 for their parts in Barnard's death. Now, all of this came directly from one of my sources above. According to Justin's father, Michael Barnard, quote, "In my opinion, he should suffer the same terror and trauma that he inflicted upon my son. I, along with other family members, would volunteer to gang stab him, and as he lay on that filthy basement floor, I would take great pleasure in bashing his head in with a brick until his brains ooze out." However, Barnard said, since that can't be done, he said that he would settle for answers to the question why. Why was Stefan so weak that he would not stand up for his friend? Why didn't his parents do a better job of raising him? End quote. His father then continues to say, quote, "If there's any justice, you will die in prison or you will kill yourself. Are you here to offer any kind of apology? If you are, save it. I don't want to hear your lies." End quote. He then called Bowditch the main instigator in this case and said that he'd be hopefully killed while in prison.
Justin Barnard's grandmother asked both Stephen and Chad if they can still hear her grandson begging for his life. She said she hoped they'd never be able to return to New Philadelphia, a nice city with a calm river containing Justin's blood running through it. I hope that to this day, Justin's pleading and asking why is haunting the 4 murderers.
Dinkelman is serving 21 years to life in the Ohio Reformatory for Women at Marysville. Her first parole hearing will be held in August of 2026. So yes, unfortunately, she's given a chance at parole. Dinkelman, who was 42 years old at the time, pled guilty in December of 2005 to all charges filed against her as part of a negotiated plea agreement because entitlement. She did the crime, but someone forced her hand, as is almost always the case. She also ended up cooperating in the prosecution of Amanda Bowditch, even though Dinkelman and Chad both are the big problems here.
Justin's mother had this to say about Dinkelman, quote, "To know that a mother of a teenager killed my son is incomprehensible. Diane Dinkelman bludgeoned my son to death while her son was in the home. She performed repugnant acts on my son in her home, disposed of my son's lifeless body, then continued to live with her son in the home where these acts were committed." End quote. Justin's father also spoke before the sentence was imposed. He said that his son cared for others very much and probably considered Dinkelman, as well as her son, a friend. His dad goes on to say, though he was not a saint, he was innocent of anything that would have warranted his murder, let alone in the manner in which Dee carried out the murder and the abuse of his corpse. He then turned his attention to Dinkelman, who was seen dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and said, quote, "Every time you wake up in that cage, I want you to think of Justin. You will have everything free at the cost of my son's life. Remember to thank him every moment of your miserable existence." End quote.
Now, I'm sure that you guys have already gathered that Justin's dad is very pissed and heartbroken about this, and I can't say I blame him, but he closed his comments by asking Dinkelman the question that has been asked over and over. Quote, "Why? If you ever come up with that answer, contact me personally. I want to know." And yet, no answers. No closure. Just to remind everyone listening, D was a 42-year-old woman mad about a potential shit-talking. So she stabs him. Secondly, Chad was the one who started this shit. Dinkelman got away with far too much, but she's apparently getting out soon.
Chad entered a plea deal. Prosecutor Amanda K. Spies directed Judge Edward O'Farrell, who, by the way, retired January of 2021, to sentence Bowditch on the aggravated murder count, which can result in a sentence of life without parole. Under Ohio law, although an offender may plead guilty to multiple charges stemming from the same act, they can only be sentenced on one charge. In cases that contain multiple counts, the prosecutor decides upon which count the sentence will be imposed. So, as the prospective jury was called and the first group was being decided, Paul Hervey, which was Chad's attorney, decided on a private conversation with prosecutors and O'Farrell. After 2 private meetings, Chad went ahead and pled guilty, stated by Hervey that they wanted to save his family the heartache of a trial.
Amanda Bowditch was the last one to get a sentence. Prior to this, she was awaiting a second psych eval after the first one said that she was fit to stand trial. I won't go too thick into it, but I have to say I sympathize somewhat to her plight. According to her defense attorney, she was sexually abused a multitude of times and had developed borderline personality disorder as a result. She was described as someone who was easily manipulated and wanted to please everyone, but also described as someone who faked mental illness to get a lesser sentence.
It was noted that she had wanted to end her own life since as young as 11, but didn't know how. It was noted many times in the court proceedings that these two were friends and that Justin cared about Amanda very much. He gave her friendship when no one else would and was there for her. And you know how she thanked him? By helping kill him. It's incredibly sad that suicide is even considered an option to people, but it also feels like she uses it as a pity crutch, which unfortunately is a thing. It just gets to me that there were actual legitimate friends and yet she participated. Nobody forced her hand. Jesus.
Okay, so Justin's mother really does break my heart right here. I feel like some of what she said would normally be a bit too harsh, but as a mother myself, I do not blame her one bit. She's noted as telling Amanda that she hopes that she succeeds in killing herself one day. Now, Justin's father goes to the stand and sadly begs her to look into his eyes, his quote-unquote blue eyes, I recall him saying. And I assume that Justin had the same kind of eyes based off of that alone. And he had pleaded with Amanda to remember how much Justin loved her.
Amanda Bowditch's mother said that she feels bad she couldn't give Amanda the help that she needed. Quote, "I feel your pain and suffering. I am very sorry. They lost a son. I'm losing my daughter. She does have a heart. Justin was a kind, loving person. She loved him as well." End quote. We get that she feels bad for her daughter, but come on, she isn't losing her kid to the degree that these two just lost their son. She goes on to say, "It's a nightmare we can't wake up from either. We are suffering as well. She's my little girl. I loved her as any mother would love their child. I never turned my back on her, and I will never turn my back on her." End quote. Finally, Amanda herself expresses some remorse for what she had done by saying, quote, "I can't give you your son back. I am very sorry for what I've done. I know there are times he cared for me and loved me. I don't know why we did what we did." End quote.
Justin's mom is quoted as saying, at one point, quote, "How do you deal with something like this? It's not something you are programmed to do. It's like the world did a flip and it's not back on its axis yet." And she's right. As mothers, we're programmed to defend our children to the utmost degree. We aren't exactly meant to be programmed to deal with mourning the loss. It's not something you just deal with.
Justin Barnard is remembered in New Philadelphia to this day by his friends and family. I can't emphasize enough the impact he has on a town and his group of friends. Justin was unfortunately a victim of a senseless murder, only falling prey to an insecure and overly jealous douchebag and his posse of equally disgusting douchebags. His memory is placed forever in photos of a heart-shaped Lego memorial placed on the walls of Park Place Teen Center, which is now, unfortunately, closed down.
In the show notes, we will include a link to the Facebook page, Remembering Park Place Teen Center. If he had been allowed to live, I am certain that in some way, Justin would be making an impact on the world. Advocating for misfits, abuse victims, and the less fortunate. It is up to us to keep his memory alive, as very much like April Tinsley, he too almost went forgotten. I've had the utmost pleasure of getting to know Justin through the memories of his close friends and extensive research, and I also am heartbroken by his loss. But my intent is to reach people as much as I feel he would have, and let those who are less fortunate, misfits, and abuse victims know that we are in your corner. We're your allies, we're your advocates, and we're advocating heavily for you, as I'm sure Justin would have.
I'd like to say from Courtney and I, to Justin's family and friends, we are so terribly sorry for your loss and only hope and pray that Justin's memory be fired up and rekindled. He seemed like such a beautiful soul, and we would have welcomed him into our inner circle with open arms. We applaud you in all the strength you have all had in his memory, and I can assure you that he is smiling down on all of you. So happy to be at peace and feeling loved and accepted by all who have surrounded him in life and in memory.
And Justin, you are loved, remembered, and missed. And you have impacted people for the better, whether you had known that in your life or not. Thank you for your servant's heart and purest of soul. May you forever rest in peace, knowing you did good in the world.
Before we wrap up today's episode, please don't forget to join our Patreon for bonus content, such as our Not So Nefarious Criminals podcast. Each week, we have a guest who we always kind of forget about, which is weird and pure evidence that Courtney is now 40. We talk about the lighter side of crime, such as Florida Man. It's a great palate cleanser. You also get to hear archived content that we chose to take off the public feed.
We will be at the 2023 True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival in Austin, Texas. Almost said Dallas. But yeah, that'll be August 25th and 27th. And come see us unless you're a complete asshole, and let's kick it. Sonia was the one that recommended this case, right? And she's going to be there with us, and so will Shay. We're going to have so much fun. There's going to be a lot of great people there, and you do not want to miss out. It's so much fun, and you get to be around advocates. Tickets are for sale at truecrimepodcastfestival.com, and we will have stuff to give away.
Justin Derik Barnard was a kind soul who loved Legos, NASCAR, and had the most beautiful heart. He would have given the last dollar he had to someone in need. What happened to him was cruel and senseless, and he deserves to finally rest in peace. His story needs to be told and more awareness raised on it. Justin, like everyone we cover on this podcast, is a bee. Bees are resilient, strong, yet vulnerable. We need bees to survive and to thrive in life. Without bees, we as humans are doomed. So always be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Music used in the theme was originally recorded by Ghost Stories Incorporated, remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional background music is provided by Epidemic Sound. A Nefarious Nightmare is scripted, researched, and produced by Courtney Finner and Amanda Cronin. This podcast is a Cloud 10 podcast managed by Sim Sarna, Sahiba Krieger, and Jamie Rice of Murderish and Dirty Money Moves. You can help us grow our show by leaving us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Or you can join our Patreon for lighthearted bonus content. Thank you, and as always, be vigilant.